Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming along to attend this webinar hosted by Findacure. The purpose of the webinar is to really introduce you to different ways we can help you in progressing your repurposing projects for rare diseases. And this has all come about in collaboration with Cures Within Reach and Helix in a project we're running, which is our open call for rare repurposing research. So the aim today really is to introduce you to that call and the work that Findacure and Cures Within Reach and Helix are all doing in the repurposing space. As you can see, we've got a couple of talks in this afternoon's webinar. My name is Rick Thompson. I'm the head of research here at Findacure, and I will be speaking to you for a delightful half hour, which will hopefully be very enjoyable. And the aim of my talk is to give you a great introduction to drug repurposing and why we at Findacure think this is a great way forward for rare diseases, and from there to give you an understanding of the background of the open call itself and what we are really looking for from applications, a little bit about the application process and a sense of how these projects that are going to move into the open call will be assessed. From then, I will be very pleased to hand over to Dr. Bruce Bloom, who is President and Chief Scientific Officer at Cures Within Reach. So Bruce has been working with Findacure for a number of years now and has been integral in the establishment of our social impact bond project that I'll be telling you all about. Bruce and Cures Within Reach are founders of the website Cure Accelerator, which is a platform designed to help introduce researchers and clinicians to people who can fund repurposing opportunities and really hopefully progress repurposing across the spectrum. So Bruce will introduce that platform and some of the work they've been doing, and hopefully that'll be really a helpful and informative talk for you. We're aiming to have about half an hour's talking each, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So as you will hopefully see on your panel, you can submit questions to us in writing along there. We'll be looking at those throughout the webinar and picking out some of the major questions to go over at the end. There's also a chat function at the side and your ability to put up hand. If you've got any issues, please do that or use the chat to let us know, and we'll try and get back to you and let you know if there's anything we can do to help out. Finally, we are recording the webinar today, which we're going to plan to release online on our YouTube channel at some point tomorrow. So hopefully anyone else you know who might be interested in this will have access to what we're talking about. This is one of two webinars that we're doing about the open call, and the next one will be a week today, on Wednesday, and that will feature a talk from the team at Helix, and we'll focus more on how you identify repurposing opportunities. And we're thinking of that one as being slightly more focused towards the patient groups, this more towards the researchers. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. I'm not seeing anyone's got any particular issues. So I'm going to move on and begin my talk. As I said, my name is Rick. I'm the head of research here at Findacure, and this is all about why we are looking at repurposing and what the Rare Repurposing Open Call is all about. So Findacure is a UK-based charity that focuses on rare diseases, and it's important for us all to understand why rare diseases are such a huge issue. In the UK, there are 3.5 million people with a rare disease, but that's about 350 million people worldwide, so a huge proportion of the population. We define a rare disease in the EU as affecting 1 in 2,000 people in the general population, which is actually a surprisingly low threshold. They're far more common than we think. People with rare diseases have huge challenges. They face diagnostic odysseys, taking them a long time to reach an accurate diagnosis, often having 3, even more misdiagnoses through their lives. There are big mortality risks for children, and 75% of rare diseases affect those children. But the real worrying thing from a repurposing perspective and our perspective is the complete lack of treatments. Of the roughly 7,000 rare diseases that are currently known, only around 400 have licensed treatments, and this is these are huge unmet need for those patients. What we do have in the rare disease world, though, is an exceptionally informed and active patient population, and they really do have the power and the determination to deliver change for themselves, and that is something that at Findacure we're passionate about. I'm passionate about working with these patients to help them make a difference for themselves. So Findacure has 2 major aims, and the first of these is patient empowerment. We want to work to help these patient groups grow, to develop, and to professionalise so they can have a big impact on their own rare disease space. What we also recognise at Findacure is that rare diseases are fundamental They're fundamental to science, and they're fundamental to how we can move our understanding of science and genetics forward. So we think rare diseases are trailblazing in patient engagement. They're often used to research some of the new and cutting-edge technologies. Anything that happens with rare diseases can actually affect things with common diseases. So the science that we conduct in rare diseases really does have impact and benefit to everybody. Because of this, Findacure's second major aim is to really try and promote collaboration to help us develop new treatments. And this is something we work very hard on throughout all of the work that we do. Within this subset of our work, drug repurposing is a major issue. And this is really caused by the trend you can see on this graph. What we can see here is some data talking about the number of new drugs that have been approved through the years since 96 to 2013. And you can see there's a general decline in that number, but there is a general trend for an increase in the cost of drug development, of R&D spend in the US at least. And that's a trend that's seen worldwide for developing new drugs. And this is a problem. Things are getting more expensive and fewer drugs have been made. This is not a great position for people to be in who are waiting for treatments. In rare diseases, we have the Orphan Drug Act, which has made a big difference and has really helped to increase the research that's been done in the rare disease space. However, there's always this trade-off because you have to still develop the drug, it has high costs, and you have a small patient population. There's always this kind of trade-off between the rarity and the developmental cost of the disease versus the expense of treatment. And what we're seeing in the rare disease world is that orphan drugs, things that are licensed for rare populations, have a really high price. We can see in this graph here, the pale purple bar is the average cost per patient per year in US dollars for an orphan drug compared to the darker color, which is a cost of a non-orphan drug, and that's around 5-6 times the price, which is substantial. So Findacure want to work in drug repurposing and develop a drug repurposing platform, and we want to do that because we believe this has potential to hopefully deliver treatments more quickly to rare disease patients, which is one big problem, and potentially deliver these treatments more cheaply as well. So at its most basic level, drug repurposing can be likened to recycling. Okay, it's the act of taking a drug that's intended for use in one patient population and showing its effect, its efficacy in the treatment of a completely different disease, a different population of patients. And we want to do that through a clinical trial. So what are the major benefits of it? Well, really, the fact is you're working with something you know, and whenever you're working with something where you have prior knowledge, things can be much quicker and potentially much cheaper. And really, in rare diseases, where there are many other challenges associated with the rarity of the condition, this is a big help. Essentially, in repurposing, we don't have to worry about de novo drug discovery. If we haven't got to do that, we eliminate a hugely time-consuming and expensive part of the drug discovery process. We're not looking for a new chemical entity. With repurposing, we know something about the safety profile and the side effects of a drug, and this means we can really use that to our advantage. We know which drugs are likely to be safe in which patient populations and which aren't. And if we're looking at a generic drug, we probably have a long history of human use. So we have a huge amount of data about which types of populations respond well to it, possibly its use in patient populations, and possibly its use in populations outside of its usual license. And all of this can mean we can have a reduced early stage clinical trial requirement. The safety stages of clinical trials can often be presented through research from existing literature or use of the drug. And this again makes things quicker and cheaper. Another thing that we have is known pathways of action. Now this makes things much easier, because if we know the pathway of action for a condition, for a drug, sorry, we can have ideas about its evidence for repurposing candidates. So rather than having to look for a wide number of different drugs, we can really focus on those drugs that work on the pathway of our specific rare disease of interest. And this cuts down the workload we have to go through and can again speed up the process of repurposing. So really, drug repurposing is a key thing. We can look at these simple facts to highlight that point. The average cost of developing a new drug is around $1.6 billion by some estimates. There are around 7,000 different rare diseases out there. Very few have got licensed treatments. So the total budget required at that current rate to deliver drug to all of these groups is about $11.2 trillion. That's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. Repurposing, as I've said, is a faster and cheaper way to deliver these drugs to patients, and it's essential we find this kind of route to solve this clear and huge problem we're facing. Okay, so if repurposing is great, what's happening? Well, there's lots of work being done in industry on repositioning, which essentially is looking for new uses for drugs that are shelved compounds or currently are already licensed. But in the generic space, things are a lot tougher. Repurposing a generic drug, one that no longer has associated intellectual property, should be really very appealing because we know a huge amount about it. We have a mass availability of information. Unfortunately, it's hard to secure intellectual property on those ideas. You can get mode of use patents, so a patent to allow you to use a generic drug for a specific indication, a specific condition, but that still is at risk of other off-label prescription of existing similar generics or the same generics being used, so it means it's harder to recoup your investment. So this is really the fundamental problem with generic repurposing at the moment. It's hard, and understandably hard, for pharmaceutical companies to profit from the development of the drug, and therefore it's unlikely they're going to work on developing these types of projects. What this basically means is you have a situation where you have high development costs of drugs, but very small fragmented patient populations, and so we end up with very little happening, my tumbleweed of financial inviability. And this is something we really want to avoid. Now at Findacure, we're aware that patient groups in particular, often in collaboration with academics and clinicians, are beginning to change this and are focusing on repurposing as a way that they can contribute substantially to the movement and development of new treatments for rare conditions. And an example of this is the alkaptonuria society. So alkaptonuria is an ultra-rare disease, which is otherwise known as black bone disease, and it is caused by a problem with the enzyme that degrades an acid called homogentisic acid in the body. And what happens when you have a buildup of this is that it turns the joints and the bones black, essentially causing an early onset form of osteoarthritis. Now, this is a very unpleasant disease, obviously, but what the AKU Society have done in collaboration with Professor Ranganath, who's based in Liverpool, is identified a drug that is otherwise used for tyrosinemia type 1. So this is a repurposing case that affects this pathway, effectively blocking the buildup of HGA, and should theoretically eliminate the HGA buildup, and that will mean eliminate the symptoms of alkaptonuria. Now, the AKU Society have gone further than having an idea. They've gone out and secured funding, European funding in this case, to run clinical trials to test the efficacy of Nitisinone in this condition. It's been very successful so far. They've passed the phase 2 clinical trial stage. They're midway through their phase 3 trial stage, and are not far away from actually having a licensed and effective repurposed agent to treat this ultra rare condition. This is a condition with around 50 patients in the UK, maybe up to 100. So it's a very rare condition and an exceptional example of what patient groups can do with repurposing style research. Now, what Findacure want to do is try and encourage this type of research, but we recognise that not everyone can access European level funding, particularly on Brexit Day. What we have to therefore look at are different means to secure funding. And what we're doing there is looking at something called social finance. So social finance is an approach to managing money which delivers benefits to society as well as an economic return to investors. So socially financed projects are generally completed by the third sector organisations, charities essentially, and they really work to provide an intervention to a social problem, hopefully receiving government funding that's based on the success of that intervention. These are generally called payment by results mechanisms. So social impact bonds have been used a number of times, both in the US and initially in the UK, to address a range of different problems. The first example, I believe, was in Peterborough in the UK, which was all about reducing reoffending rates in prisons. They've also been used to reduce truancy rates, and I think there are around 30 different social impact bond projects active currently in the Department of Work and Pensions. Findacure, and indeed Cures Within Reach, believe that we can use the social impact bond to repurpose drugs. So to have a social impact bond, what you need is a social problem, an intervention to change that problem, and a way of measuring how successful you've been. So in this case, it's very clear that the social problem is that there's a large number of rare disease patients with no access to treatment and little hope of there ever being treatment. And this has a certain burden of care on the health system and on the families and patients themselves. Our intervention in this situation would be to find generic drugs that have potential to treat the rare disease and to try and run clinical trials to prove their efficacy. The success measure in this case would therefore be the number of rare disease patients that are receiving repurposed treatments and ideally benefiting from them. So where's the money in this model? How can we use this as a way to fund drug repurposing? And we believe that the reduced burden of care is the key here. If we can deliver treatments that can really make a big difference to the patient population themselves, we can reduce the amount of care that they need to be provisioned through the health system. And therefore, by paying a small amount for a low-cost drug, we can massively lower the cost of healthcare and make big savings to, in our case, the NHS or to other health systems. So this is how the model works. This is our social impact bond, and what we're initially looking for is to attract private investment into that bond. What we'll do is use the money invested in the social impact bond to fund phase 2 efficacy studies, phase 2 clinical trials into generic drug repurposing projects for rare diseases. We want to target those rare diseases clearly that have a high burden of care to the health system. And as Findacure is a UK-based charity, we're focused currently on the NHS. If we're successful in our clinical trials, we should find a number of treatments that can be delivered with the NHS at a low cost, at a generic cost, probably in an off-label prescription model. In that case, what we're asking is the NHS to recognise that they are going to make savings. They're going to reduce their spend on caring for the rare disease patients that are prescribed the drug. And what we want to do is access a proportion of that money that they save to be paid back into the social impact bond. What this means is we can then return that money to our investors and potentially, if we're successful enough, fund future repurposing trials. That's number 6 on the figure here. All of this means the key point about our model is we're generating returns from healthcare savings, not from a high price of the drug. So it's a really different way of trying to go about funding repurposing research. Okay, so this sounds like maybe a bit of pie in the sky to some people. What we've done is gone away and conducted a proof of concept study to show that this can work in 3 specific rare diseases, in 3 specific rare disease repurposing projects. So in each of these conditions you can see, congenital hyperinsulinism, Wolfram syndrome and Friedreich's ataxia, we've identified a viable generic that could be repurposed into the project, and we've gone away and run health economic studies to see if this type of model could work. What we've shown is that in all 3 cases there's a relatively high burden of care to the UK NHS to look after the patients. So in the case of Wolfram syndrome, for example, that price is to treat roughly 64 patients in the UK. Small drop in the ocean, 990,000 to the NHS, but a large amount of per patient care. We've gone further than this though. We've shown what we think repurposing the specific drug would save the NHS in this care. And again, we've shown in all cases that this would greatly reduce spend, generate clear savings. So the budget impact on the column here, which shows the amount of money that could be saved through this repurposing over a 5-year period. And again, in all of these cases, we're not saving vast amounts of money, but we're saving an amount of money which would be hugely beneficial if that could be provisioned back into the research or to reimburse the research that's been done on repurposing drugs for these conditions. So what we believe we've done is prove that a social impact bond can work as a tool to fund phase 2 repurposing studies. We know these aren't the most lucrative studies, but we know the principle is sound. And this really brings us on to why we're here today and what we're hoping to do next, and that is to source a whole range of new and different repurposing projects that we can hopefully use to help develop this model and ideally, ultimately, be able to fund with this social impact bond model. And that is the Rare Repurposing Open Call. So the Rare Repurposing Open Call is a collaborative project that we launched on Rare Disease Day, the 28th of February. And it's going to be running for a 3-month period until the 31st of May. And this project, as I mentioned at the start of my talk, is a collaboration between Findacure, that's a rare disease charity in the UK, Cures Within Reach, a charity based in the US who are focused on drug repurposing, and Helix, who are a startup here based in Cambridge who are working specifically to repurpose drugs for rare diseases. And what we're thinking about with the Repurposing Open Call is it's a chance for researchers, for clinicians, patient groups, or even people from industry to try and highlight the importance of repurposing and to generate some support for generic drug repurposing for the rarest of those diseases. Ideally for them as well, it gives them a chance to advance projects that they might have in development but can't find funding to give it a chance to reach the patients that need it. The Repurposing Open Call is hosted on Cure Accelerator, and that's what Dr. Bruce Bloom will be talking about in the next part of this webinar, giving us an idea of what Cure Accelerator is and how we can make the most of it. Okay, so that's a very rough introduction to what we're trying to do. I thought it's important now to give you a more detailed breakdown of our aims with the Rare Repurposing Open Call. So the primary aim really is to identify some repurposing projects for rare diseases that fit these three criteria. We want to find projects that are scientifically robust, that have potential to impact patients, and that are currently struggling to secure the necessary funding to move them into the clinic. So the aim here is to identify some projects that we hope, as a group of collaborators, we can find ways to help advance. That might be through funding, that might be providing scientific support, that might be through patient group development, but in some way we want to try and identify some top-line projects that we can help move closer to reaching the patients that need benefit. The second and equally important major aim of our study is to really promote repurposing as a valid route for rare diseases. We want to really show that researchers should be able to pursue it, and they can use this route to deliver some meaningful change and meaningful treatments to rare disease patients who are currently massively underserved. So within this aim, we've got two kind of sub-aims, if you like. We really want to build a body of evidence to support the idea that there are repurposing ideas out there that fail to secure the necessary funding to reach clinic. And this is a message we want to take to the NHS, to NIHR, to other bodies internationally, to show that there is a need for support to drive this type of research forward. And we really just want to introduce repurposing as a new option to those who are interested in trying to work in the rare disease space and can see it as a viable route to deliver something new to patients. And that's probably going to be the focus of our second webinar in particular. Okay, so if you decided to get involved in the repurposing open call, what are some of the outcomes for you? And this is an important point, and clearly it's important for us to make sure people who are involved benefit in some way. Now, the first of these two outcomes, if you like, fall into the general altruistic umbrella of the point of the open call. What we're trying to do in our general aim there, our second aim, is to encourage this as a route for rare disease patients and all people who work in rare diseases. We think that if you are involved in this call, you'll be helping to encourage the use of repurposing as a route to deliver new treatments, and that in itself is a clear and important thing that we should all be working towards doing. You also help to develop, hopefully, a new funding mechanism that can help drive rare disease repurposing research forward. And this is a model that we're committed to try and drive forward in some capacity, both here at Findacure and within Cures Within Reach. And we really feel that the social impact bond model has a lot of potential. By getting involved in this and showing that there are ideas out there that need funding, we think we can really help show the need and drive our SIB model forward. More tangibly, however, there are clear benefits that we hope to deliver to the best projects that come through in the open call. We're looking to secure support in developing, we're looking to provide support to the best projects to develop some health economic modelling, like we've done with those three examples I showed you earlier. And we really feel that health economic modelling is an important way you can help demonstrate the need and viability of a project, the value of a repurposing project, which some may see as a non-sexy type of science, if you like. We also want to work between the other collaborators to help provide support to the best projects or advice to the best projects to help them move closer to the patient group, and that could be through working with some of the technology at the Helix team, through advice with some of the collaborators we have here at Findacure or Cures Within Reach. By hosting this on the Cure Accelerator platform, we're giving everyone who proposes a project access to a range of different funders in repurposing research, people who are really focused on trying to drive repurposing forward. People who submit to this have a chance to be funded by those people and secure funding to move their projects forward, and this is something that's very tangible and important, and we really want to promote. And finally, if we can really deliver the social impact bond model and drive it forward, which we need more ideas to do, we have that real chance to actually launch a fully commissioned social impact bond model and hopefully secure funding to run a clinical trial for a number of projects that are proposed through the open call. So those are hopefully a number of good reasons why you should think about being involved in the Rare Repurposing Open Call over the next few months. So who can take part? Well, everybody is the general answer to that. Things are by far the most straightforward for academic researchers or clinicians. All you guys have to do is sign up to Cure Accelerator. From there, you can find the request for proposals for the Rare Repurposing Open Call and respond to it. I'll take you a little bit through the basics of the response to that myself in a moment. I'm sure Bruce will say more, but really a very straightforward procedure that we think would take a limited amount of time. It's also open to companies. Companies can equally sign up on Cure Accelerator and respond to the questions in the same way, and this should be a relatively straightforward process for them. And we think this route could appeal to those companies that have lots of different repurposing ideas, but are holding on to those that are generic and really don't show any commercial viability. Well, we appreciate it's hard for those companies to move those ideas forward, but we hope this could be a route that those ideas could begin to move and reach patients using the social impact bond model or other funding options. Equally, if the project has commercial potential but a small company is struggling to move it forward, it can be indicated. You can let us know when you're submitting that project, and we can treat it to make sure that project remains more private, and we can look at different ways it could be moved forward in a commercial capacity, again through the collaborations that are involved in this project. Finally, we really do want patient groups to engage and involve in this as well. We know that patient groups themselves have exceptional connections with clinicians and researchers in their field, and also a number of them may have their own ideas or evidence to support repurposing opportunities in their condition, and we would love to hear those ideas. On the Cure Accelerator platform, as I'm sure Bruce will mention, you tend to need to be registered as a researcher in some way, because the submission proposal follows a funding mechanism route. But if you'd really like to submit something yourself and you haven't got access to a researcher or academic who could do that for you, please do let us know. Contact me directly, and we can work on a way to allow that idea to be taken up as part of the open call. It may be in some way less likely to reach a fully funded stage, but it's certainly an area where we'd love to explore with you if we can find different ways to help you move it forward. So, as you know, there's multiple partners in this collaboration, and I thought it'd be good for me to give you an idea of what Findacure's ideal projects are. And the first page here really highlights some of the scientific markers that we're looking for. And these probably are more unanimous between the different funders. We're really looking to repurpose a generic drug for rare diseases. We will look at non-generic drugs, of course, but generally we are looking for lower cost ones there. What we are after, though, is as a scientifically well-developed profile. We want the candidate repurposing project really to be supported by preclinical data. Those are the projects that are going to sit more ideally into this call. And in a perfect case, it'd be great to see an in-human case study or two that really supports the effect of the drug in humans. Again, we're talking ideals here. We'd love to see metrics and biomarkers that can allow us to assess the impact of the drug in a really robust, clear way. That's going to make things much easier for delivering a clinical trial. And really crucially and fundamentally, we want to see something that's a disease-modifying treatment and something that's going to have a significant patient benefit. We need to have clearly one of those, and always the patient benefit needs to be foremost. How is this going to help the patient population, and have you asked what the patient population are actually looking for? Now, within this, there are also a range of different ideals that Findacure as a charity are looking for, because to us, in our ideal world, we'd like to find projects that fit into our social impact bond model. So there are certain things that would help a project do that. Of course, we're very open to projects that wouldn't necessarily be ideal for this, so please do put them forward if you're not meeting many or all of these criteria. What we really would like is a UK collaborator, because currently we're developing the model in the UK NHS, so having that connection with the UK would make things a touch easier for us to move forward and establish with those collaborators in the National Health Service. It's really crucial to fit into the social impact bond that you need to be able to reduce the healthcare spend on the condition. And ideally, we'd like to see any evidence that might be available for this. We'd like to see that it costs a lot now to manage, and that there's some way we can reduce it through delivering this generic drug. We don't need detailed health economic results right now, but that's something we can definitely help develop if that would benefit the project. We want all projects that we're working on to have a connection to the patient group. It's something we believe in very strongly at Findacure. There are different ways and important things that patient groups can bring to these projects. We want to make sure they're included. And this, again, gives us access to patients that would help us run those clinical trials we hope to deliver. And in an ideal world, we'd like to think we can have projects that are ready to start within 2018. We'd like to begin to move this forward at that stage. So that will be something we're looking for. So, the submission process, I'll just go over very briefly. The form is available as part of our request for proposals, RFP, on the Cure Accelerator community. It's really been designed from a perspective as helping us identify the most suitable projects for the rare disease drug repurposing social impact bond project. That's kind of a necessity. We have to have the information we need to pick on the best projects that we could potentially fund through this mechanism. That's crucial to make it a success. What I really want to stress in this, though, is that submissions outside of the remit of the SIB are really welcome, and even submissions that are outside of the remit of the scientific outline are welcome too. We really want to understand what the need is out there, and if you have a project that you want to share, then please do. The form itself really tries to balance ease of submission with a need to secure project details. We don't want this to be a large, laborious process for you. We would think you can complete something on the form relatively quickly. There are certain parts that are needed though, so it is structured as if you're applying for research funding, so that kind of awareness experience is always helpful. It includes a basic sample budget for the next stage of the project, so in most cases that will be a budget for delivering a clinical study or clinical trial into this repurposing opportunity. We're also looking for some information that you might have on the current cost of the treatment for the condition you're trying to monitor. If not treatment, then the cost of the care, because we'd like to try and show that we can reduce that spend through repurposing in any case where possible. So in that case, please do try and provide any links or sources of evidence that can support these estimates, because the more robust that can be, the better. Please do have a look at the submission form and investigate it, and if you have any issues, we really would like to hear about it. This is something we've tried to put together for this call, so let myself let myself know, and I can easily pass information onto the team at Cure Accelerator to make sure we can refine things if there are things we can improve. And so the final thing for me to think about and mention is just the assessment of projects. So projects are going to come into us and they'll be visible by the Findacure team as well as the team at Cure Accelerator, and will ultimately be assessed by Findacure and its Scientific Advisory Committee, and that does include representatives from both HELEX and Cures Within Reach. It's hard to say exactly what we're looking for in each case, but what we're trying to do essentially is stream those projects that we think might have commercial potential from those that might have potential for the social impact bond, for those that would be ideally suited for matching with funding from other sources. And in all cases, we're going to be evaluating projects on these four major areas. We want to see that what scientific support there is there, and projects will need relatively strong levels of scientific support to advance to a stage where we might be able to provide clear and strong benefit, or potentially move it into a funding stream. We want to see there's a patient focus of the research, that patients who have been involved and been engaged with when people are trying to develop these treatments. Does this address a patient need, and have patients been included in how it's moving forward? Ideally, we're looking to see how research ready you are. Is there a clinical facility available? Have you got access to patients? Is there a clear plan for the clinical trial itself? And how cost effective would this be? Can we actually save money to a healthcare provider by provisioning this drug? Are we simply asking for a low-cost intervention to help patients? Again, a really cost-effective way of doing it. And we'd love to really get a handle of all of these things. As I said, we really are open to many and all different proposals just to see what need there is. So if you're in doubt, please do contact me and let me know about the project you have and whether it might be suitable to submit through the Rare Repurposing Open Call. And with that, not too late, I will thank you very much for your attention. I hope that's been a useful overview of the Rare Repurposing Open Call and encouraged you to engage and submit. I will obviously be available for questions a little later, but at this stage, it's time for me to hand over to our next speaker. This is Dr. Bruce Bloom. So as I mentioned earlier, Bruce is President and Chief Scientific Officer of Cures Within Reach, and this is the charity that is behind the Cure Accelerator platform. Bruce has been involved with Findacure really from the stage when we've been thinking about the social impact bond project. He's been exceptionally helpful and supportive to everything we're doing here, and it's a pleasure to hand over to him.
So, excellent job presenting a tremendous amount of information so well in a short period of time. You did a great job. I'm going to try not to repeat anything that Rick said and just sort of take you through a little bit of information on Cures Within Reach and Cure Accelerator, and then show you how to use Cure Accelerator, and so that I can answer any questions you might have. So I just want to take you through a couple of slides around repurposing research. The first thing I want to tell you is a little bit about Cures Within Reach. there are three things ideally that we do. One is to connect research and funding together so that proof of concept clinical trials for the repurposing of drugs, devices, nutraceuticals, for all that can take place more quickly. And to date, we've funded about almost 70 clinical trials. We have 13 different treatments that are being used by patients, either off-label or are on their way to commercialization. Second thing we do is to create collaboration tools like Cure Accelerator and the drug repurposing conferences that we put together, and working with groups like Findacure and Helix and other patient advocacy groups and governments and not-for-profit funders to allow people in the world of repurposing to find each other. And then the third thing that we do is identify new economic engines and incentives to support repurposing, like the social impact bond. We've been working very closely with Findacure and the team in England to see if we can get the NHS to support this. We're also working in Canada and in the US to try and do this. And our ultimate goal is to have kind of a global social impact bond that lots of countries would participate with. There are some repurposing or rare purposing examples I'm going to talk in a little bit of detail, but we help to fund the repurposing of the generic drug sirolimus for a rare pediatric autoimmune disease. It works great. 85% of those patients that would normally have died in their teenage years are now going to live normal and hopefully long lives because of this particular drug. About 85% of those patients get into complete remission in 90 days. We've had some patients on for as long as 9 years now with no dose escalation. And we were able to then further repurpose it for 5 additional pediatric autoimmune diseases. We've done some proprietary drug repurposing in a couple of diseases, including myelodysplastic syndrome. And we've done some nutraceutical repurposing, combining some bioactive supplements, nutraceuticals, to really help with solving a couple of other rare diseases. And the cost savings that were generated in these diseases is what helped us think about whether a social impact bond might be the right kind of economic incentive to support repurposing. There's been a significant amount of savings per patient per year with a small investment. In the autoimmune disease, over $100,000 in savings per patient per year. In the nutraceutical disease, over $50,000. And so when you look at that, here's the investment that we did in funding these conditions. So a little over $2 million, but the potential saving is huge. And even if only 1% of those patients use the treatment, there's still a huge return on investment for what we spent on the repurposing research. And that's why we're so excited about the idea that even with small patient populations, and these are global patient populations, you still could save a tremendous amount of money and have a huge improvement in patient outcomes. And so one way we're doing this is through our Cure Accelerator platform that we built and launched in June of 2015. And it's the world's first online interactive platform to bring all the stakeholders together in repurposing. We currently have 150 projects posted from more than 50 research institutions. We have 17 requests for proposals that are funding mechanisms. You can see there's a high proportion of rare disease projects that have been listed. There's currently over 1,000 users on Cure Accelerator, and we're hoping to have over 2,000 by the end of this year. There's multiple stakeholder participation so that researchers and clinicians can post projects, funders can post requests for projects or fund projects, and everyone, including patients, clinicians, government, industry, can all talk about and participate in forums. So in our current funded research, we funded 17 new projects since August of 2015. 7 of those are in rare diseases. We currently have 27 total projects in our repurposing portfolio, and we're really excited about this repurposing call that Findacure, Helix, and Cures Within Reach are doing together. So I want to share with you a little bit. So if you go up on the Findacure site, you'll find the link to the repurposing call on this page. It's down towards the bottom, and if you click on the repurposing call, it will take you to a page that looks like this. So this is sort of the public view of the call. It provides a little top line information, and then down here it says if you'd like to see more details, click here to register. If any of you already have a login, you can click here to log in, but if you click on the registration button, currently you'll get taken to a page that looks like this. So this is the small amount of information you have to provide: first and last name, an email address, and a password. And then you get to select what your user type is. So if you're a researcher or a clinician, you would check one of these boxes. And these allow you to have special permissions on the site. Whether you're a funder or a company representative, there are different things that you can do. We also ask for a street address in case we ever have to contact you if there's been a breach of security. But this is all the information that you need to sign up. And then when you click here, you'll get an email verification that will take you to a login page. So you put in your email address and your password, and if you click to log in, you'll immediately be brought to your own dashboard. And the dashboard is different. So this user that I'm logging in under is a researcher. And so you'll see that this researcher is allowed to start a new project here. And on his dashboard is all sorts of information, including a link to the request for proposals that are there. So if he clicks on that, you'll see right here is the repurposing open call. You can click through to see that. And what I want to show you several things that are available here. So the entire open call and all the descriptions are listed here. And if you want, you can click on this button and it will download a PDF version of the open call. So if you want to, now have this and take it with you so you don't have to refer back to the website all the time, all the information that you need is here. It also provides a way for you to forward this open call to other people at your institution or people you would want to collaborate with. So feel free to send that along to other people. There's also a place here where if you just want to send a link to them, which would be this page, you're welcome to do that. You just put their email address in and click share, and it'll send them an email saying you, as the initiating person, have shared this link with them so that they can then log in. But as you can see, all the information on the call is listed, and as you go all the way to the bottom, there's the opportunity to start a new proposal from this call. So if you're interested in doing this, all you need to do is click on this button and it will open a page for you to begin filling in the information that's necessary for responding to the open call. And so these are the fields. Obviously you need a project title, and we ask you for a small public abstract, the principal investigator name and the institutions that are going to be involved. Then you can put in the disease condition. You can put in more than one if you want, and do a little disease background description. You can also put in the treatment that you want, or treatments if it's multiple treatments or a combination of treatment. Then there's a place in here to describe the research that you're going to conduct. There's a question about being in contact with a patient group or charity, and if yes, you can provide some details. Then you can move to the next page. You can indicate whether you have any existing project funding and what your requested project funding. As Rick mentioned, there's a breakdown. These are the only categories you have to break the budget down to, so it's not very difficult to do that. Then there's a button here about making sure that your institution participates with this, because there's some co-funding that's required. There's some disease details around the prevalence and the current treatments, the actual direct healthcare costs, and the non-healthcare societal costs. We ask about any omic data sets that are available that could be helpful here. It has to be a human clinical trial and the estimated length of time you would do. Are there any safety concerns, expected health impact, reduction in healthcare costs? You can add files if you have publications and put in your biosketch. Then there's a question about evidence. So is there any published information or published or unpublished observational data? Anything about patents and other kinds of approvals, either in your country or in other places. And then you can invite co-investigators to your project and list them. We also ask you to list at least 3 people that you believe are qualified to review this proposal that don't have any conflict of interest. And then finally, you can decide who gets to see the project visibility. So as Rick mentioned, if you're a company or if you have some very confidential information, you could click for either only funders to see it or even only the Cure Accelerator administrator. So that way we can protect some of the privacy until we're able to know how to do this. Then you click save, and when you're finished, there'll be a button that asks you to submit it, and that's basically everything that's necessary. If you stop partway, the system saves your information as a draft, and you can go back in. If you were to do that, what you would find is back on your home page, which would be there every time you logged in, there would be a list of your projects. So, for example, you would see under here that you have a project, and it would have the title, and then you would be able to click and just continue on. There's all sorts of other things on here, but it's sort of beyond what we wanted to talk about today. But there are lots of other requests for proposals. You can respond to any of those you want as well. If you're a physician, you could start a case report. So here are the other requests for proposals that are up there, and some of them are brand new. There's also a discussion forum if you want to have a discussion about different kinds of things, whether it's about repurposing research or Cure Accelerator or off-label use. And you can also browse the other projects that are there to see what kinds of things other people are doing. And again, you can't see all the projects if they've restricted those to a limited number of users on the site. Our hope is that when you submit your project for being published, that you would let everybody see it. We're hoping for more transparency, but we know that there are reasons why people don't. There's also a button on here for you to see who else is on Cure Accelerator. So there's a community button, and you can search. There's also a search criteria here. So I don't know if Rick is up on it, is logged into Cure Accelerator, but you can do a search function and see if you can find other people that are there. Yep. So Rick is signed in, and you'll be able to see that. And there's also a proposal where probably one of the co-investigators has the last name Thompson. So there's a robust search capability up on Cure Accelerator. So we hope that it's easy. There are all sorts of places for you to get help. If at any point you're running into a problem about proposals, just click and it will allow you to send an email. We respond directly to those. Every one of those comes directly to me, and so I can see and respond to any of the questions that you have. We're totally supportive of this project. We love to see, of new projects, hundreds of new projects, to help tell the world that this is an important thing for us to all be working on. Because otherwise, we're not going to be able to drive treatments to patients as quickly as we want. And there's so many opportunities here between what researchers know, what clinicians know, and what patients are doing themselves to really help with that community. So that's really all I wanted to show about Cure Accelerator, and cures within reach. So Rick, I know I'm a little ahead of schedule, but I don't think anybody will be upset with that. And so I think you want to turn it open to questions and answers, or if you have anything to add to what I said.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bruce. It's a really, really helpful way to get a guide on what's going on with Core Accelerator, and hopefully people can see the potential of the platform from that, and get some clarity on what we're looking for in submissions to the Repurposing Open call. So I will just switch the presenter. Go on.
Well, one more thing I did want to add. So just for each of you to know that after you've completed your project and it's published, you can also download a PDF of your project. So there's an easy way for you to save this offline for yourself at any time. So it's just as simple as clicking the button, and much like you were able to see the RFP, you're able to see your own project and all the information that you put in there. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruce. I will switch the screen back to myself. Okay. And yes, so at this stage, we'd like to have some time for people to answer some to ask some questions. We've had a couple of questions that have come in so far. I know one question came in from Megan Golden, who was asking about the place on Cure Accelerator where you can actually respond to it, but I think that Bruce has answered that in his presentation. So I don't know if, Megan, you could just confirm that you're happy with that answer. If not, then we can go back over that for you. So just drop me a message on the chat if possible. In the meantime, there's another question I'll just address now, and I'll answer this myself and then pass it on to Bruce. So Sam Ratunga has sent in a question. They said that does the use of the SIB rely on prescribing of medicines on an off-label basis by doctors? Do you think there may be regulatory issues with this, and how do you think NHS trusts would deal with the indemnity aspects of this? So this is a really good question that we tend to get raised quite often with the SIB, and it's very understandable. Currently, in the social impact bond model as we're conceiving it, we are looking at off-label prescription as the primary route of delivery to patients. The main reason around that is obviously the ability to protect the low generic price. There are different ways that we could look into trying to access a market authorization, and that might be something which we bolt in prior to the success payments through the NHS. What this would do is obviously slow the process down somewhat and increase the costs, but that's not necessarily a problem with the right condition. So if we can generate enough savings, we could more than likely generate the returns we would need to cover those costs. With respect to the rest of the question on off-label, I think it certainly is an area where there might be some issues with some clinicians, but what we're thinking in the rare disease space, particularly in the UK, is that there are certain dedicated centres that are delivering the care and treatment to the patients in these areas, and these are controlled by a very small, limited pool of clinicians and doctors. So those are the clinicians and doctors we have to work with, to collaborate with, to understand the level of success in the research, whether it is reaching a level of evidence that they feel confident enough for their own prescription. And that itself is crucial, and if that level is met and they are willing to prescribe, that would admittedly be at their own risk. But that change should be sufficient to reach the majority of patients, so we don't feel patient access is too much of a problem. We also know that with a number of these centres, there is a relatively regular off-label prescription of a number of treatments or drugs to manage symptoms of patients, and this isn't necessarily something that would be a problem for NHS England if they were commissioning that specialist service. It would be something we'd have to explore if we were looking at a service that was commissioned on a more local level. So, I mean, it's a complex answer to give, really. It's definitely something we're exploring, and in a recent meeting we had here at Findacure, we were really talking about the importance of trying to have that market authorization as the gold standard approach you want to have, but recognizing the fact that ultimately we are aiming to deliver something to patients based on some evidence, which is otherwise, they might receive with a lack of evidence, or otherwise might not receive at all. And it's finding a way to do that in the safest and most effective way that we're looking at. So I hope that answers your question from our perspective, Sam. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Bruce.
Yes, a couple of things. So one of the things that we've experienced in the rare purposing that we've done with generic diseases is that the physician-to-physician global network kicks in almost immediately when the results of the proof of concept clinical trials are published. So in the pediatric autoimmune example that I gave, in the first 90 days after the principal investigator published the results of the clinical study, he received hundreds of phone calls and emails from around the world from other clinicians who had one or more patients they were treating. And together, this group of clinicians began to sort of establish a standard of care. And in many of the countries, including the US, physicians are allowed to prescribe off-label. And so we didn't see any necessity to try and get market authorization for the repurposing of sirolimus for those conditions. The cost would have been prohibitive, and it really wouldn't have provided any greater access to the medicine than was already being provided. So that's the first thing. I think there's lots of examples of that happening. The second thing I wanted to say to the guests that are listening is that we are starting discussions here in the States with the FDA about some kind of a sort of conditional market, I don't even think I would call it authorization, but sort of a permission to continue to use a generic drug that has been proven safe and shown to be effective as we collect more data on rare patients. And our hope is that sometime in the future, there'll be this sort of seal of approval without complete authorization where the FDA in the States says, we've looked at the data, there's nothing else to give these patients, it works, this is a cheap and safe drug, we're going to say to physicians it's okay to use this, and we'll collect more data for the next several years, and then we'll revisit this sort of conditional approval. So I think even the regulatory authorities are realizing that there needs to be a new kind of method of helping physicians and payers know that it's okay to give these kinds of repurposed therapies, especially in the rare disease world.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. I'd echo just that last point as well, that there's a number of discussions that we're aware of here in the UK that are trying to look at ways to encourage generic drug repurposing by generics manufacturers, and also to find ways to secure not a full marketing authorization, but some level of increased approval and acceptance of standard practice where there's good evidence for off-label use of drugs, particularly in rare and under supported conditions. I know there's a piece of work NICE are looking at on that. There's a drug repurposing task force that are doing work on this right now, and that's tying in with work by the British Generic Manufacturers Association to try and find new incentives to promote this type of research to happen from an industrial perspective as well. So I think it's definitely an area that is moving. I just wanted to return then to the question from Megan. Thanks for your response, Megan. So this is something I will just clarify a bit with Bruce as well, and a kind of ad hoc clarification for myself. So Megan was asking earlier, Bruce, about how to actually submit a proposal, but obviously Megan's just let me know that she's not a researcher, so she's interested in being involved in the open call, but she's not currently a researcher. So on Cure Accelerator, you need to be registered as a researcher to submit a proposal, and that would explain why she couldn't see the button you were working on there. My feeling is that Megan, the best thing would be for you to contact me directly, and you'll see my email address on the next slide at the end of the talk. And what we will probably be able to do is find out a bit more about your project and possibly allow you to submit something via email. We can give you the questions that we're looking for the project, and see where you can go with that. That will probably be the best way to have access to a patient group or patient-led submission for this idea. And I do feel personally that's something we'd like to like to see, because it's helping to provide the support for this route, and we can work out if there are particular ways we can help and direct your project. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Bruce. Am I misrepresenting what you can do in terms of submitting on Cure Accelerator?
No, that was correct. Megan and I met in New York about a month ago, and we've been in contact. And so I would say for groups like Megan's, to have the researcher or clinicians that you think might be interested in submitting the project, get in touch with Rick or me, or just log into Cure Accelerator. And so one of the steps that I think is important is, if you register as a clinician or a researcher, you can have access to the place to submit a project. But when you click on the submit button, if you haven't already done this, it's going to ask you to complete a little bit of additional information to tell us that you really are a researcher or a clinician. So depending on what country you're in, you might be sending us your website or your license number or something like that. So we have a method of verifying that you are who you are. Because anybody can click on the researcher button at registration and look like a researcher, but they can't actually finalize and submit their proposal until we have verified them, which takes 15 seconds to complete the information. But so Megan and I will continue to be in touch. Megan, you're welcome to contact Rick as well, and I'm sure he can help with your chronic pancreatitis issues and other kinds of issues, connect you with some researchers in the UK if you don't already have some.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks again for clarifying your question, Megan. That's much appreciated. At the minute, we've not got any more questions, so I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to submit. Please do send that in. I will just spend a moment going over the slide you can see in front of you, highlighting some of the upcoming events from Findacure. These are actually 2 webinars, or our next 2 events. The first one is the one I've already mentioned. The next webinar in our series about the open call. This is focusing on identifying repurposing opportunities. It's next Wednesday at 11 AM British Summer Time this time, and it will include a talk from our other partners on this, Helix. So Helix are heavily involved in using different technologies to identify repurposing opportunities for rare diseases. They have a range of technology, particularly looking at omic approaches, so looking at the genes that are expressed in the body and using the signature of gene expression to match to a signature of drug expression, so hopefully use drugs to counterbalance the gene expression in a rare condition. So it's a pretty interesting area, and there are a range of other ideas I'll be talking about, and I believe one of Helix's chairman will be talking to us, who's got extensive experience in the repurposing field. It'd be great if you wanted to attend that talk. I will also be talking there, and I will confess now there will be some overlap in the content, simply because we need to make sure everyone is up to speed with repurposing itself. But it'd be great to see you there. Secondly, we have a webinar in our Explained series, which is going to be talking about medical research explained, and this is a webinar focused at patient groups, giving them some insights into how they can engage themselves in medical research and hopefully begin to move forward their own programs and projects to deliver some new treatments or of much needed understanding or research in their particular rare disease. And that's on Tuesday, 11th of April. It'll be hosted by Flora Fai at 11 AM. So if you're interested in that, or have a patient group that you work with who might be, please do connect them and let them know. I've had no more questions come in, and it seems that chat is nice and quiet. So I think with that, we will probably close proceedings. Thank you all very much for your attention. I hope it's proved useful. We've had steady attendance throughout, so I really appreciate your commitment to being part of the webinar. Thanks to Bruce for his really valuable contribution. What you can see here at the bottom is my email address. Please do feel free to reach out and contact me. You can also follow us on Twitter at Findacure_FDN, and check out our website, findacure.org.uk. If you add a /open-call to that, you'll go directly to our open call page, but you can find a link to the open call page on our homepage as well. Thank you all for your attention and time. It's been a pleasure, and I hope this was useful.